Sarah is a professor of foreign language teaching at the University of Graz in Austria, where she is head of ELT methodology. Her research interests include all aspects of the psychology surrounding the foreign language learning experience. Let me just switch over to her slides, actually, while we're talking about her as well. Okay. She is the author, co-author, and co-editor of several books in this area, including Exploring Psychology for Language Teachers, which was also the winner of the I.H. Ben Warren Prize, and Teacher Wellbeing, and those are both OUP titles. She's currently Vice President of the International Association for the Psychology of Language Learning. In 2018, she was awarded the Robert C. Gardner Award for Excellence in second language research by the International Association of Language and Social Psychology. So that's enough big words from me. We'd like to hand over to you now, Sarah. We look forward to hearing you.
Thank you so much, Kieran. Thanks for a lovely introduction. Hello, everybody. It's lovely to kind of virtually see you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. I wish I was seeing you in person, and I know there's a lot of people here that I know, and it's great to see you. So I'm just going to give you a hug from a distance and say I'll look forward to spending a little bit of time with you now. Okay, so I'm going to talk today a little bit about teacher agency and why everyone benefits when teachers are empowered. Now let's start off with a little poll. Kieran, if you want to give us a poll, how would you rate your professional well-being currently? So 1 being low and 10 being high. Let's see how people are voting in this. Let's have a look, see how our well-being stands at the moment. Let's have a look. I don't know if you can see the poll as well. I think if you go to the poll, Kieran, I think if this is right, you go along to the poll tab at the top and then you can see what the results look like.
Exactly, yes, yeah.
Okay, so if you want to take a look and have a look yourself, you can see that there's a real spread. Some people have got rather low well-being, some people are sort of hovering around the middle, and some people have got high well-being, which I'm really pleased to see. Okay, so my hope is that today is going to also boost your well-being. Agency and well-being are very tightly interconnected, and when you're experiencing high agency, this leads to higher well-being. When you have high well-being, you're more willing to enact your agency. So we'll talk a little bit more as we go on about how those two things are connected. So a little bit of background to what agency is. You've had a whole session of talks about this during the conference. I know that Andy started, so I'm aware that some of you might be already prepared to talk about this. Agency, the official definition is this capacity to act. So it's not something you have, it's whether you feel in your context with your resources, your structures, everything where you work, if you feel willing and able to act in that environment. So it's about feeling empowered as a professional. This is the one that I want you to keep in mind. This is the kind of short definition. And if you can keep this in mind during the talk, I'll keep coming back to it and explaining what I mean by this. So teacher agency is about your willingness and your capacity to take action as a teacher. And this means not just the sort of regular action that you do in the classroom. This is about your willingness and capacity to act in your professional role and in your professional sphere. And you can imagine that when you have got high agency, you're willing to try new things, you're willing to push the boundaries, you're more motivated, you're more engaged with your job. Your well-being is likely reciprocally to grow in that sense. Why agency is so important now. As you might remember, some of you I know were kind enough to take part in some research we did during the first set of lockdowns last year in April and May. And what we found was that I think 78% of teachers were forced to transition to online teaching within a week. So that's huge numbers of us making massive changes to our professional lives in a very short space of time. Most of those teachers had no training or preparation to do that. And teachers have been doing a fantastic job of adjusting in this past year to all kinds of new conditions, constantly changing aspects of their professional lives. So this ability to make decisions and to choose forms of action that are healthy for you and your learners, that's key. That's all about agency. And that's why that's so important, particularly now. Agency is always important, but right now, this constantly shifting field of working conditions makes it particularly important that you feel empowered to take action. Just some of the things from the literature why teacher agency is good for you. It's good for your well-being, for your emotional regulation, motivation. Self-efficacy refers to your confidence, how capable you feel in your job. It also has a knock-on effect for learners. When teachers feel agentic, so do their learners. The two affect each other. And also teachers with high agency tend to have learners with higher student achievement. So hopefully the things we talk about today will boost your well-being, but also your students will inadvertently benefit as well from you having high agency. This slide's really important to me to stress. Now, I know that I'm talking primarily to you guys as teachers. And so I want to talk about things today that are going to be things you can actually do. So I don't want to get too caught up in some of the sort of background and structural things, but your ability to act as a teacher, your willingness and capability to act is about how you as an individual feel, but how you interact with what's available in your context, the structure, the resources in your environment. So it's not just about what you do, it's also about what is available within your institution, within your educational system, and so on. Now, ideally, there would be changes in the system and in institutions to empower teachers more. Everybody, learners, teachers, parents, everybody benefits when teachers are given agency and when agency is facilitated. But today, I'm going to really focus on the things that you can control and you can change, because this is the stuff that you can walk away from today and hopefully say, okay, these are some of the things that I can do. So please don't think that this is only about your responsibility. I'm hoping that there might be some policymakers, some institutional leaders, some DOS in here that feel that they can reflect on today's session and find ways to empower their teachers more. Okay, so hopefully I'm going to give you some ideas of things you can do to enhance your own agency, to help you feel that you've got more control over what happens in your professional life. And I'm hoping that policymakers and school leaders will think a little bit about some of the things they could be doing to support the agency of their teachers and to give them some opportunities. Now, I don't know how good this decision was on my part, but when you're preparing a talk like this, you've kind of got two options. You can either prepare a small number of things in great depth, or a wide range of options for you to just go and find out more about. And I chose to do the second one. And you might get to the end of this talk and think, I wish she'd just concentrated on 3 things and gone in more depth. But my idea was, I'm going to talk to you about lots of different ideas and hopefully inspire you to sort of take these words, take these notions and go and find out a little bit more about them if they're of interest to you. And that way, I'm hoping that, especially when we've got nearly 1,500 of you, at least 1 or 2 of the things might appeal to you. It is quite natural that out of all the things I talk about today, not everything will resonate. But if some of them do, then you can at least take those on board and go with those. So what I did is I've organized the notion, and those of you who know me know that I've got this thing, I love making up acronyms and things like this, so I've been playing. And I've decided to talk about elements of agency in relation to choice, voice, and rejoice. And that's how I've organized the talk, and we'll look at each one of those in turn. And these are the things, keep that name in mind, particularly if you're a school leader. You want to empower teachers by giving them choice, by giving them voice, making sure that they're heard, and by rejoicing in celebrating what they do and supporting and caring for them as teachers. Okay, so let's look at choice first. I've chosen 3 things that I think might be things that we can attend to in terms of empowering teachers to give them more choice. We want teachers to have some autonomy, the ability to job craft, and CPD, which for those of you who are not familiar with that, stands for continuous professional development. But as you're all here on a Saturday taking part in an ELTOC workshop, then I'm guessing that you perhaps know the notion of CPD. So autonomy refers to the degree of independence you feel you have in your working related practices and decision making. And obviously, we know this from learners. We talk all the time about learner autonomy and how we can foster and support that. But we very rarely talk about teacher autonomy. Now, the interesting thing is that as teachers, of course, we're constrained by the curriculum and by the school regulations and the policies of our institution, but we do have quite a lot of choice and quite a lot of autonomy. So we've got some potential to make decisions. So let's just use the chat box. What areas in your professional life do you feel that you've got autonomy in? I'll do my best to read them, but with 1,000 people, it goes really quickly. But let's have a look, see if I can spot some of the things. So what areas in your professional life do you feel that you've got some degree of autonomy in, some things you can do? Thank you for that comment, Vivian. Yeah, CPD is central, and we'll talk about that. Okay, so making online materials, planning, choosing materials. Oh, curriculum, Catherine, that's good. Actually, in the classroom, hi, Björsen. Lesson planning, creating new materials, some of the academic parts, lesson planning, tools that you use, choosing texts, choosing curriculums, course books, choosing methods, choosing the way that you teach, lesson planning. Excellent. Fantastic. So have a look here. These are some of the things that you've mentioned and some of the other things where we actually as teachers have some sense of autonomy. So we can choose some of the tools and the techniques we use. We can choose about how we manage classroom management, the decisions that we make. We can choose how we organize our administrative tasks, so maybe when we do them and how we work on them and so on. We can manage our time for planning and correction and how we plan, when we plan, the way that we plan. That very often is something we have choice in. Sometimes the curricular decisions is something we have choice in. Not always. I realize that depends on your institution. Topics, materials, whether or not you do project work, the amount of type of homework, the format for feedback, so the kind of format, the kind of feedback that we give. Sometimes we have autonomy when it comes to evaluation and assessment procedures, sometimes choice of management of CPD, also whether and who to collaborate with if we decide we want to do projects with other teachers and other colleagues and so on. So one of the nice things about being a teacher is there are actually lots of areas where we can find we've got some degree of autonomy, where we can make our own decisions. So the nice thing about being a teacher is that you've got some constraints about your working environment that is naturally in place through the system and the institution. But we can find ways to do things in the way that we like to do it and to have a little bit of creativity. And that's one of the joys, and also why teaching is quite demanding, is that there's a lot of things that you make decisions about and a lot of things that you choose to do. If you are some of the people running in institutions, these are some of the areas where you can think about giving your teachers more autonomy, more choice, so that they can make the decisions. Teachers are professionals with expertise, and being able to create teaching in the way that you envisage it is much more empowering and motivating. Now, the other way that we can tweak our jobs to make them something that we feel we have more control over, something that we're more connected to, is through something called job crafting. And again, you might, if you want to find out more about this later. So job crafting is where you tweak your job, you make little alterations, and they can be big or small alterations, so that you can do things that you feel are more meaningful and more interesting and more pleasurable. So job crafting is making small or big changes to your job in a way that is more motivating for you. And there are 3 areas where we talk about things that you can craft in your job. So task crafting is, for example, choosing the type of tasks that you do in your job. So what things you do, how you do it, when you do it. And those are some of the things that came up where you talked about autonomy. So it's looking for different jobs that you have to do and thinking, how can I do this in a way that suits me better? How can I make changes to this so that I'm doing things in a way that I find more motivating or more empowering? Relationship crafting is about how we interact and who we interact with. So, I'm sure we can all imagine that there are some colleagues that we don't get on with quite so well. And so reducing the contact we have with teachers like that, colleagues like that, and then doing more with people that we find motivating, that we find positive, that we share a vision of teaching with. So relationship crafting is about looking in your working environment and who do you want to have more contact with and who do you want to have maybe less contact with. And cognitive crafting means how you think about a role, something in your role. So sometimes, for example, sometimes thinking about a task that you don't like, is there a way that you can think about this differently? So sometimes people don't like doing things like assessment. But if you look at that as part of the process of helping them grow, helping them improve, helping them see a direction for their growth, contributing to that learner achieving a meaningful goal for themselves, helping them to gain confidence in their abilities. When you think differently about things, you can change maybe the way that you feel about it. It doesn't work for everything, but it does work for a lot of things that you might not feel so positive about in your job otherwise. CPD, you guys are all here on a Saturday afternoon taking part in this webinar, so I don't need to tell you about CPD. You are already big advocates of CPD. We know that if you take part in professional development, all of us, whatever stage of our career, whatever job, wherever we're at in our workplace, it can be just so motivating, so empowering. It gives us such a boost to take part and get new ideas and talk to new people. But if this is imposed by an institution, and if the quality is poor, and if what is being talked about feels irrelevant, then it can actually be the opposite. It can be demotivating and frustrating. So CPD can be positive when we have some control over that and when we have some choice and some agency in how we talk about that. So obviously, you're going to say online webinars and conferences is your absolute favorite type of CPD. What could you possibly not say in this context? But what about some of these? Maybe use the chat box. Are there any of these that you find particularly useful or particularly enjoyable? Maybe it's reading books, OUP handbooks, for example. Maybe it's, being on social formats. Maybe it's being team teaching. Are there any of these that you really like? Any of these that you find particularly motivating and enjoying, apart from the online webinars? All of them. That's very good, Gabrielle. Reading books. Saturday, 7 a.m. Patricia, you are living and breathing that. Attending local education events, videos online webinars, volunteering, online conferences, videos, webinars, observing colleagues, books, all of them. Great. It's wonderful to find ways of growing as a professional that suit you and that you find motivating and that you're going to be enjoying. Maybe you can take a look at these and have a think. Maybe there's some here where you say, actually, I haven't thought about doing that. Maybe I'd quite enjoy doing more about that. Maybe I'll try out doing a little bit of that, and I'll maybe try looking at some different videos or attending a different event, or maybe sharing your expertise with others. Every teacher I know has got really valuable lessons to share with other teachers. And because it's what you do in your daily practice, you think it's very ordinary and you don't realize how great it would be to share that. And I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. One thing I'm just going to touch on briefly is one form of professional development can be to research your own practice. And you can do this through, talking with your learners about what's happening. You can do action research projects where you look at something that you want to improve. But I really want to encourage you to think about something called appreciative inquiry. One of the things that I critique sometimes about CPD is that sometimes it automatically takes a deficit view. In other words, it says, this is what is wrong, this is what you should be doing better. And you know what? Most teachers are already doing a fantastic job. Appreciative inquiry says, what is going really well in my practice? What am I doing really well? And how can I appreciate that? And how can I think about extending that and using that in other areas of my professional life? So what am I doing well? What am I enjoying? What works really well with my learners? How can I think about transferring that to other aspects of my professional life? How can I use those strengths in different areas? And I think that's a fantastic way of conceptualizing research about your own practices, not looking at what's wrong and how to make it better. Why not look at what's going really well and how we can transfer that to other contexts? So maybe have a little look about appreciative inquiry in another context later. So when we talk about choice, these are the three things that we've got some choice in: how we can have more autonomy, how we can craft and tweak our job to make it something we enjoy even more, and what forms of professional development we can get involved in so that we can learn more, feel more confident, and get that motivation boost that we get from finding out more, learning more, and being connected with others. Okay, let's have a look at the next thing. Let's have a look at voice and have a little bit of a think about voice. Voice, what I mean by this is empowering teachers to share, to communicate, to connect with others, and to feel confident about what they do. And all of these things that I've picked today kind of link together. So if you take part in appreciative inquiry, you're likely to feel more confident because you're not always looking at what's not working. You're actually looking at what you're doing really well and enjoying that and starting and building on those kind of positivity. So I've chosen three areas: self-efficacy, communication, and professional learning networks. And these three ideas for things that you can do for teacher agency to sort of give yourself that little boost. So your self-efficacy refers to your confidence to achieve goals and complete tasks. So what things you want to do, what things you'd like to complete, and how confident you feel about doing that. This is really important for teachers, that you feel confident about what you do. And that comes with experience and time, but it's also about recognizing what you do well. Don't be afraid to say, this is something I'm good at. Very often we're used to sort of playing down our strengths, and we get kind of embarrassed if we say I'm good at this, but everybody's good at something. So don't be afraid to say, this is what I'm good at. Self-efficacy is about looking at the different areas of our professional lives and saying, if that's something, maybe I need to do a bit of work on that, but that's something actually that I'm really good at. And developing that confidence in yourself and feeling that you know what you're competent at and you're good at, that's very empowering. And remember this last thing, nobody is completely good or completely bad at anything. Everybody's got strengths and weaknesses. That's just normal. That's what it means to be a human being. So I'm going to give you a chance to now share your strengths. Which of these areas as a teacher do you feel most confident in? Is it maybe integrating skills, teaching social cultural competencies using technology, giving instructions, building rapport, building positive group dynamics among the learners, giving balanced, constructive feedback, maybe creating your own materials? I saw earlier a lot of you enjoy doing the planning materials, being creative. Using the target language yourself, your own language skills, managing your stress and well-being. So those of you who know, I've got to think about that. So building rapport, good. Integrating, building rapport using technology. Giving instructions, number 9, using the target language, using technology, building rapport. That one too quick for me to read. Using technology, building rapport, positive group dynamics, integrating different skills, high energy classes. Oh, fabulous. Lots of things here. Very good. I'm absolutely delighted to see that you recognize you've got strengths and that you can build on those, and that these are things that make you a good teacher. These are things that you can say, this is something I'm good at, and more of these kinds of things, building these in and building on those, is things that we can do to make ourselves feel a little bit more empowered as a teacher, and that gives us confidence. And one of the things we talk about, and some of you will be very familiar, is growth mindset means believing that you can improve your skills. And we're very keen to encourage our learners to have a growth mindset about their abilities as learners. But we need to keep that growth mindset as a teacher. None of us ever get to the stage, or I certainly don't, where I think that I'm done. And there's always new stuff to learn. And that's what's most rewarding about being a teacher, is you're never finished learning. There's always new stuff to try out and new things to learn and new things to develop as a teacher. And that's actually really rewarding. And that's part of this professional development, that we can keep growing as a teacher. So this has been a really strange time. I'm now coming up to a year teaching online, and I'm still going to teach online all summer semester. I miss my learners. I miss seeing them in person, but boy, have I learned a lot about myself and about myself as a person, but also professionally. So look for growth opportunities. So even when we're faced with really difficult circumstances, and nobody can deny that this past year has been such a challenge, but there's always an opportunity to learn something. There's always a chance for you to take something positive from that experience. So is there anything that you want to share in the chat box? What have you learned this past year? And I'm hoping for positive things now. What are the things that you can take from this time? What are the things that you can learn? Learning is more important than teaching, generally. Never stop learning. This is a lesson for life, I think. Any other things? Using technologies, I've become much better at using technology. I think that's one of the skills that I've developed more. So online learning, resilience, Manuela, I think a lot of us have learned resilience in different ways. And I think that's a good thing. Also flexibility, being more creative online, knowing our limits, being persevering, adaptable, patience, using new apps, using new materials, helping students to become positive, gratitude. There's a lot of things to be grateful for, getting a sense of perspective. Merv's well-being, that's very good to see. Empathizing with students, connecting with students online teaching, being patient, using technology, excellent. So even when we're faced with really difficult, challenging circumstances, there's always something we can learn from that opportunity. The other part of voice is having good relationships with our colleagues. Also, we build those with our learners, but also thinking about the people that we work with. So finding good, honest communication, ways to connect with each other, ways to build those relationships. This is one of my favorite quotes, and I probably need this. It's teacher syndrome. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. so we can listen twice as much as we speak. And I think that is so lovely that when we connect with people, we're so desperate sometimes to share our story. And it's really important to also give the other person space to speak. So when we're trying to build our agency and we're looking for social connection, learning to be a good communicator, learning to listen to our colleagues, learn from them, and offer them space so that they feel heard, so that they feel that they have been listened to. This is a kind of rash that we want. I would really, really stress this with anybody who's in a leadership role now. But of course, this applies just as much when we're working with learners. Everybody needs to feel respected, appreciated, supported, and heard. And we want our learners to feel that. We want our colleagues to feel that. And we absolutely want to make sure that anybody that is working with us feels this. So if you're in any kind of leadership role or working with a group, try to think how you can have more rash in your workplace relationships so that everybody feels appreciated. And you know what? Why don't you be that one person who writes a note to your colleague and says, you know what? I think you did a great session with that, or thanks for that material. I love the materials that you shared. So sometimes we would like this to come from leadership. It doesn't always, but we can be the agents of change. We can be the one who does that. So use your agency. Take the initiative and tell a colleague something you appreciate about them. So why not say something that you like about them as an individual, something that you appreciate about them as a colleague, something that you think is fabulous about how they are as a teacher. We all need to feel appreciated. Everybody wants a little bit of a pat on the shoulder sometimes and wants to feel that they're valued. So it'd be so nice if we can so why not be the one? Why don't you be that person who spreads that positivity and says something nice to your colleague about how much you appreciate them? Another place to get that social connection is what's known as professional learning networks. So professional learning network is some kind of connections that you have with people where you can share a value, share passion, share areas of expertise. So a professional learning network is just a word really to talk about a kind of group, a network of people that you connect with who are maybe also teachers or who share a passion about, like, for example, gaming. I saw some of you were interested before in gaming and teaching. So where you connect with people who share something in common with you. And it can be general, teachers, or it could be language teachers. You're part of the Oxford community. So obviously the ELTOC community is a good place to link in with other people and to connect. And you can build your own professional network. And this is a great way to give you power, learning opportunities, also to boost your motivation to feel connected. So look for professionals, dare I say it, OUP, you're here. That's fantastic that we've got this space to be together. Look for social forums and groups. Look for bloggers, podcasts. Maybe there are people that you respect. Reach out to them. I always, I think about people that I've contacted in my professional career, people that I was completely overawed by, these gods and goddesses, and they were wonderfully kind and wrote back to me, and so much to learn from and so much to connect with. So reach out. What's the worst they can do? They just ignore you. So it doesn't hurt. So, reach out to people, find people to connect with, to learn with, to share ideas with, to get feedback from. Obviously, online is a great way to find your network, to build up your professional network of people. Face-to-face events, eventually, we're all desperately hoping that we're eventually going to get back face-to-face. And use your voice. You all have expertise. I'm 100% sure of that. You've all got something to share. So don't be afraid to reach out. A PLN should be reciprocal. In other words, not just that you take things from it, but that you contribute. So don't be afraid to share your ideas. Say, guys, I did this in my class. It worked really well. I just wanted to share it. People will be so grateful for that. And also it gives you that boost, and it confirms to yourself that you have something to contribute in the international space. So please don't be afraid to be part of that expertise. Think about different PLNs. So work life, obviously, but also think about your personal life. So think about ways that you can maybe, do things that you've got a hobby. Maybe there's something that you're interested in that you've taken up as a hobby, maybe recently, and think about where you can connect on that. And I'm going to stress here, personal learning networks means it's on your terms. So these are your learning networks, and you do it in the way you want, on your terms, how you wish to do it, so that you create a network that is meaningful for you and that you feel that you can engage with in a way that is enriching for your professional life and not a burden. If you find that you're in professional networks and there's some bitchiness going on, some moaning and complaining, or you feel there's just withdraw if it's not for you. There's no obligation about these spaces. It's on your terms and you're in charge of it, and you decide what works for you and what's a healthy space for you to be in, and what's a space that you're finding. If you find a space turns toxic, then you just withdraw from it and you go into your own space. And I love this quote from Michelle Obama. We know that our greatness comes when we appreciate each other's strengths, when we learn from each other, and when we lean on each other. And that's what a professional learning network is. It's about finding other people that we can connect with, that we can learn from, to know that we're not alone. Sometimes in a classroom, you're very on your own with your learners. And it's so nice to know that there's a whole community there that wants to learn from us, to connect with us, and that wants to find that kind of interconnection with each other. Okay, so voice, self-efficacy, the confidence about what we can do, what we know that we're good at, being able to share that, feeling that we are capable of what we do. Communication, building those relationships, being able to communicate with others, connecting with others, and building a professional learning network. So looking for ways that you can contribute, but also people that you want to learn from and that you want to have more contact with in that kind of social space. So the last element of agency I'm going to talk about is rejoice. So it's a lovely positive one to end on. I put 3 things here that we're going to talk a little bit about: locus of control, motivation, and well-being. Locus of control refers to the things that are in our control. So particularly with everything that has been going on with the pandemic and everything that's happened in this last year, some things are just out of our control. And learning to not get upset about the things we cannot control is a hugely important aspect of professional and personal well-being. You can get all upset about things that are out of your control, but if you can't control it, the only thing you can control is you can control how you feel about it and how you think about it. If it's really and truly out of your control, then you need to step back from it and find the appropriate distance to it. Otherwise, you're just going to get upset for ways you can't change. Hold on one seckie. Too much talking, you see. So in locus of control, one of the big things is learning to accept the things that we cannot change, and then making changes to the things that we can change. And knowing the difference is a really important part of locus of control. So in your professional life, if there are things that are frustrating you, look at it and ask yourself honestly, can I do something about this? Can I change it? And if I can change it, what about it can I change? So go back to the beginning, think about job crafting. Is there some way I can tweak this? Or is this something that is really not in my control? And if I can't control it, can I at least change the way I think about it? So again, back to job crafting, can I change how I think about this thing? So thinking about what you can and cannot change, and thinking about how we can move on from that. But locus of control means that we can choose what we give our attention to. Agency and action is about choice. And we can choose to focus on the negatives, or we can choose to focus on the good and the positives and the optimistic and the kind people. It doesn't mean that the negatives have gone away, and it doesn't mean that we ignore those. They'll need to be addressed, and if they're in our locus of control, we need to work on those. But we can also choose where we put the bulk of our attention. And there are always kind people in our environment. There are always good students, kind colleagues, supportive colleagues, positive colleagues. And so learning to think about where you give your attention, who you connect with, that makes a difference. You have that choice. So that is in your locus of control to decide who you connect with and what things you focus your attention on. At the end of the day, somebody talked earlier about gratitude. What do you choose to focus on and be grateful for at the end of the day? So there is a degree of choice about your actions and your attention and trying to find the positive. Again, not being naive and ignoring the negatives. They will need addressing in their own time and space. But when we think about agency, about being empowered as a teacher, it does mean also thinking about what we pay attention to and what we use our energy for. And we can use our energy for things that drain us, that are going to be negative, or we can say, you know what, I'm going to use my energy for something positive. And you have the power to be the agent for change. You can be that positive, kind, nice person in the workplace that everyone's delighted to talk to, because you're helping them to see the positives, to feel the energy that they can do in their job, to feel empowered. So it's about also be the change you wish to see in the world. We can wait for other things to change. And I'm not denying that there are a lot of schools and a lot of education systems where change does need to happen. But we are also, teachers are incredibly professional, expertise, competent individuals. We can be the ones to make that change. So if we can focus on the positives, we can find where we can make a difference. We can be the ones who make a change in our school and in our system. So I think that's kind of empowering to imagine that what I do makes a difference to people around me. So when you go back to your workplace, or if you develop a PLN, a professional learning network, why don't you be the one who makes that positive change in your environment? The other thing is that as a teacher, our motivation will go up and down. That's perfectly normal. We have good days, we have bad days. We have days where we get to the end of the day, we've had 6 hours of Zoom classes and we think, what, really? Honestly, I just can't anymore. And sometimes we need to have a little boost to our motivation. And I think these are things that it's really nice to remind ourselves about. Reflect on why we became a teacher, what we love about the job, why we stay in the profession. There is always a lot of positives about the job. The job is hard. Being a teacher is tough. It's a challenging job. There are a lot of things that are very demanding about it, in particular at the moment, but there are a lot of things that are absolutely fantastic about being a teacher that are incredibly rewarding. Maybe let's use the chat box. What do you love about your job? Why did you become a teacher? Share the positive things that you feel are great about your professional life and your job, because these are the things we can revisit on those little dips that we have, these sorts of low points that we have, and you say, you know what, I need to remind myself of why this is so great, why this is such a fantastic profession. It's your calling, it's meeting different people, being able to connect with people. Children are very refreshing. The people that you meet in your job, the power, sharing positivity, keeping young. Yes, teaching does keep you young. Changing lives, having fun. Teaching is fun. Being dedicated, seeing students grow, helping students to achieve, seeing students mature, being creative, making a difference in the world, creativity, sharing, seeing students achieve their goals. Very much so. So I think one of the wonderful things about teaching is we do get a lot of meaning and we do get a lot of sense of purpose out of our professional lives. And it's great to be able to remind ourselves of that if we do have a little dip in our motivation. This is a great quote. President Kennedy went to visit NASA, and when he visited, there was a janitor, so somebody who, you know, is in charge of sort of cleaning the place. And they said, you know, what's your role here at NASA? And he said, it's to put a man on the moon, sir. And you know, I love this because this janitor sees his responsibility connected to that wider purpose. And sometimes in teaching, it's not just about what we're doing in the classroom. It's about we're helping future generations to grow. Particularly as language teachers, we're helping to promote tolerance and empathy and diversity. We're boosting intercultural competence. So if you want to think about the big picture that we take part in as teachers, it's huge. So if ever your motivation dips, it's not just about your class and your school. Think about how many hundreds of students you've had contact with in your life and what a massive difference you're making to the future of the planet, the society. What a great opportunity, what a privilege we have to be teachers, really. And you know what, when you get those nice emails from students sometimes, or you get little cards from them, or you have sort of nice memories, why not keep them in a place and make a pride portfolio? And it's perfectly okay to be proud of what you've achieved and what you do as a teacher. If you want to boost your sense of agency and feel empowered, just remind yourself of all your successes. Remind yourselves of the things that went well, the things that you've done well, the successes you've had with students who've grown and blossomed in your care. That's a nice thing to do at the end of your career. So those of you who don't know, well-being is one of my favorite topics, and there's different ways of defining and looking at well-being, and your well-being as a teacher is absolutely vital to your ability to teach and to connect with learners and to have that energy to feel empowered, to make change, to connect with others, to want to do the things that you do in your professional life. So one of the things that I've taken here is a definition of well-being called PERMA. And it refers to well-being comes from finding positive emotions. So think about what we talked about, looking at your pride, looking at the positives. Engagement, finding your motivation, finding connection to your workplace. Relationships, having positive social relationships at work with your learners, and also looking after your relationships outside of the workplace, spending time on those. Finding meaning in what we do and having a sense of accomplishment. So again, what we're confident about, what we've done well, looking at our achievements as a teacher and also celebrating those. Talk to your institution, see if you can find a way to celebrate the achievements of teachers so that we don't take it for granted that we all work really hard, that we dedicate this time to students, but that we celebrate that we actively celebrate, not just on Teachers' Day, on World Teachers' Day, but at other points during the year too. There are different, this is very personal, so I'm not going to ask you to share this necessarily, but these are some of the things that will affect your well-being very strongly. So being able to engage in hobbies, things that have nothing to do with your work, something that you can completely disconnect and think about other things. Being able to socialize, and I realize that that's limited for many of us in various parts of the year, world right now. Quality family time, having time in nature, learning something new. I mean, you're all here, so you're having a little bit of that just now. Setting future goals for your own development and your own private life. It's important to take stock and take time to think about your well-being. It's not selfish. It's not indulgent. It is absolutely part of professional practice that you say, I'm entitled to look after myself. I should look after myself. And when I do, I'm going to be able to give more in my job and be better at my job because I'm coming from a place of positivity and high well-being. So consider these different aspects of your life. Think about, are there any areas you need to spend a bit more time on, anything that you need to improve? What it boils down to is time management. And we all know this. And I'm not even going to vaguely pretend that I have time management under control. As you can see with my slides, I'm going to have to hurry. But it's about making time for what matters. Time management is not about doing more work. Get that clear. Time management is about setting priorities, being more efficient, and giving yourself space to do the things that matter to you in your life as well as work. So think about setting priorities. One of the things that's become problematic during COVID is this blurring of personal and professional boundaries, time and space. So think about creating boundaries again, saying, okay, after 7 o'clock at night, no more work. I'm going to have to do other things then. That's time for me. There's no one way of doing this. You have to find what works for you. But time management is about looking at the time available. You only have 24 hours a day. There's no more. So looking at that time and deciding what your priorities are and making sure you make some time for yourself and that you've got time for that as well. Letting go of perfection. As teachers, we're terrible perfectionists. We want everything to be just right and we keep working on those presentations and those slides. Sometimes, you have to just say, you know what, it's good enough. And this little bit of fiddling isn't going to make any difference to the students' learning. What we've got is good enough. And learning to say no. Remember that learning to say no means it allows you to say yes to something else, something that possibly is more important and more of a priority for you just now. So rejoice is about finding locus of control. What can you control? Letting go of the things you can't control. What you can focus your attention on, what you can focus your action on, what you can make a difference to. So looking for the positives. Looking at your motivation, finding things to give yourself a boost, reminding yourself of the great job you do and what you contribute to, and looking after your well-being, not as an additional luxury, but as a foundation of good practice for what it means to be an empowered, agentic teacher. So the 3 elements of agency, I hope I've given you some different ideas here. I chose this kind of scattergun approach to give you a lot of things to choose from and think about. They won't all appeal to you. Some people will say, I like that, I'm going to do something about that. That's not really for me. That's perfectly okay. In the choice, finding opportunities for autonomy, crafting the job the way we would like to have it, and looking for opportunities for professional development, ways to grow, things to learn more about. Using our professional voice, having the confidence in what we do, looking for ways to contribute that to the community, building our social relationships in the workplace through communication, and looking at professional learning networks, how we can connect and contribute on a more global community level. And rejoicing in the things that are positive about our workplace, about our lives, finding the locus of control, finding what we can focus on positively, looking at boosts to our motivation, celebrating what we've done well, celebrating things we're proud about, and focusing on our well-being, giving ourselves that time and space to look after ourselves so we can come back to our professional lives with more energy and more time and more motivation. Thank you ever so much for joining me this afternoon. I hope I've given you a few ideas of things you can do for teacher agency and that you're a little bit inspired. And do feel free to get in touch if you've got any questions that you want to ask. Thank you very much. And
Sarah, we have time for questions if you want to answer them.
I definitely do. So hold on.
You have about 8 minutes. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. The first one, hold on, let me go. Can you see? I don't know the ones that I go to published, right?
Yeah, published. We've got published. We've got one enormous question there waiting for you as well, if you feel like answering it. If you scroll down
I'll just. Do you want me to? I'll just start with the top one. So it says, how can we ensure voice, choice, and rejoice in the low-tech areas that lack resources? Oh yeah, I think these. So let me go back. This is a question from Farouz. The question is, sorry, I have to read this out because I don't think everybody sees this. How can we ensure voice, choice, and rejoice of teacher agency in a low-tech area that lacks resources? So fundamentally, all of these things apply when there's not any technology, really. So the real technology stuff, I suppose, is about PLN, professional learning networks. But you can do those very... within your school community, within your local community. You can do it within schools in the district, for example. So it doesn't have to, that's the only one really that is about sort of online. CPD, there's lots of CPD we talked about that's not just about things that are online. So hopefully these in principle are all possible in any kind of environment. It's just that some of the ways that they are kind of acted out or enacted would be in an online space as opposed to an offline space. Okay, the next question is from Karen, and it says, when CPD is imposed, how do you motivate the teachers and then in turn, of course, the students? This is also a problem when CPD is imposed in the sense that ideally it shouldn't be imposed. There should be choice. There should be choice, voice, and rejoice, particularly in relation to CPD. And a lot of frustration arises from teachers where CPD is imposed on them. They have no choice. They have no choice in the topic. And very often they don't even have choice when it takes place. So they have to dedicate their free time to CPD they don't want to take part in. So that's just bad planning on part of policymakers and school leaders, because you're starting with an uphill battle for whoever's running the CPD, because the teachers are going to be resistant because they've had no investment and no input in that. So please let that be a lesson to anybody in this room right now who has control over CPD. For goodness sakes, do involve your teachers in deciding and communicating and making decisions about CPD, because otherwise of course they're going to be resistant. And so, you're starting on a battle uphill. However, if there is no choice and the CPD is imposed, it's about taking what you can from it. I haven't rarely been to a CPD session where I can't learn something, even if it's, oh my God, I hope I never teach like that. So even if I've been to a CPD session that was so awful, and I have in my life, where I've just looked and thought, please don't let me ever teach like that. And so the lessons I end up taking from it are, that was a really great lesson for me to learn in how not to teach. So, maybe that's about looking for those locus of control, looking for those opportunities. Is that if you have CPD imposed on you and you have no choice but you have to go, then it's up to you to look for what you can possibly take out of it. Maybe you find someone that you connect with there and you both think it's rubbish. And then you've got your personal learning network. Maybe it's someone that you connect with and you say, actually, today the CPD was rubbish, but actually I met this person and we got on really well. And I could imagine that we'd be in touch in the future. So like everything, it's kind of up to us, if we have it imposed, to find and take from it what we can, even if it's not great. Okay. Let me have a look where to go down. That's a really long one. I don't think I've got time to read all of that. Would I say, I'm going to ask, this is a really interesting question. Amir, would you please say whether teacher agency overrides learner agency? That's a great question. And I'm actually slightly biased because I do think that if you don't start with teacher agency, how can you expect teachers to empower learner agency? So I probably shouldn't say that, should I? But I do think that if an institution is not walking the talk, if you're not supporting teacher agency, how on earth can you expect your teachers to then be promoting and supporting learner agency? So there has to be a coherence, and that applies to all kinds of things. So particularly, I know that in the area of well-being, sometimes schools talk about student well-being, and then they don't even discuss teacher well-being, and I just cannot get my head around that. It makes no sense. You have to you have to walk the talk, otherwise there's an incoherence in the system. So I think when teachers have got agency and they feel empowered and they are willing and capable of making decisions in their professional practice, then they're in the right position to be able to boost learner agency. And then they're in that position to facilitate the growth of learners, the empowerment of learners. They've got the confidence to help learners to become more independent. So I do think that there is a strong relationship between teacher and learner agency. The more teacher agency that we can empower and support and facilitate, the better a position they are in to be able to support learner agency. And the more coherence we have within the system, and we don't have a paradox between learner agency and then no teacher agency, which would make no sense. The last question is from Manuel and says, how to deal in a society where reading is not a cultural thing, how I can motivate learners and change their mind. So a little bit not quite related to teacher agency perhaps, but still a decision that we make as teachers. I think reading is something, it's like all teaching. With whatever teaching we start with, and whether it's teacher agency, teacher well-being, teaching reading, we have to start where the learner is, not where we would like them to be. And if it's with teacher agency, we start where the teacher is, not where we would like them to be. If it's learner agency, we start where the learner is, not where we would like them to be. If it's teaching reading, we start where the learner is and not where we would like them to be. So you start with what they've got, and it's about building up those little steps. So little bits of reading. Maybe you start with cartoons. Maybe you get them to just read cartoons, graphic novels. And then you start with reading short paragraphs and text. Then you get them to be a little bit creative themselves, thinking about writing poems where syntax and grammar doesn't really matter so much. They can be playful with words. So getting them to build a relationship up to the written word is really important. And you do that by starting where they are and building them up slowly until they maybe develop a love of learning, a love of reading of their own. But you start where the learner is and you build them up little bit by little, building in little bits of creative writing, getting them to little bits of reading, so that they start to build up a relationship and a confidence with the written word so that it doesn't feel so alien to them maybe. And that would kind of apply to all kinds of things. How am I doing for time, Kieran? I got time for another one, or
no? I think if you finish with the questions there, Sarah, then we're quite happy for you to finish as well. We just wanted to thank you so much for that session. We can see from the comments in the chat box that was such a positive way to end things. Inspiring and inspirational was one of the comments that often came up. So thank you so much. You've left everybody with such a good feeling at the end of our ELTOC conference this year.
That's lovely. Thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for coming along.
And in fact, we would like to thank you. I must say it's been so inspirational for me as well to see 1,400 teachers on a Saturday morning early, a Saturday afternoon, a Saturday evening, a Saturday night, who value their profession so much that they spent time with us here. You really are a good bunch of dedicated teachers. So if I could, even though I'm not a presenter, I just wanted to ask you all one question. If you could sum up your experience of ELTOC this year with one word, what would it be? So if you could think of one word to express how you feel about ELTOC, what would it be? We have our 15-second lag here. Wow, that's a good one. Super, awesome, inspirational again. Look at that. Okay, the words are coming. That's wonderful. Great stuff. Well, I'll tell you what. One person who would also like to tell you how he feels and about his experience of ELTOC this year is our Master Yoda moderator, Sean Wilden. So we'll just invite him back on the screen. And I just want to say thank you again for everything. We've really enjoyed having you.
So thank you all. Brilliant link, Kieran. Thank you. I don't know about Yoda. I've always thought of myself as a Jedi Master Padawan. Anyway, thank you all for joining us. Let's just remind you for the last time before we go into the thank yous, as we get to the end of ELTOC 2021, yes, you will get a certificate. It will be sent to you within the next 10 days. Yes, you will get access to the recordings. Even if you didn't attend all the sessions, you will still get the recordings. And yes, you will get copies of slides and handouts and anything and materials that the presenters have used. All will be sent to you within the next few days. So watch out for it coming to your email. So we're coming to the end of ELTOC 2021, a new platform, same team. 3 years now we've done ELTOC. We hope you have all enjoyed it. Before we go, I think it's always important to say thank you to the people that were involved that you don't see. You see people like me and Kieran on the camera between sessions. So I'm going to ask our team that's there behind the scenes to start putting their cameras on. And if you could give some thank yous to the people that are about to appear. So you can see Natasha and Katie, who have been here throughout the whole of the conference and put so much work into getting it ready for you. You've got Kieran, who is today's moderator. It's fabulous. We've got other people behind the scenes. You've got Yezwan, you got Joanna, you got Cheska, you've got Luke, who's been helping us out today, and Katie, I think. So you should be able to see them all there. These are the people. You see Kieran and I on screen holding everything together, but really these are the people that have made your conference for you. And without them, you wouldn't have had the event that you've had for the 3 days. So I'd like to thank them all for all the work they've done and pulling it all together, and generally been a fabulous team to work with for weeks, but especially for the last 3 days. You probably never realized it all, but in the audience, you were always thousands of people, and we appreciate you all being here. And I'm sure that somebody put any questions on the screen, and I'm sure you will all want to join us again next year for ELTOC 4, but watch out for plenty of OUP, Oxford University Press, events in the meantime. Right, we're going to go. Thank you all again. Have a good rest of your weekend. Stay safe. Take care. And see you again soon. Bye-bye for now.